Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Speak English for Beginners. I am Emma, and today I am very happy to practice English with you. In today's podcast, we are going to learn how to speak English on the phone with confidence. Phone conversations can be difficult for English learners because you cannot see the other person's face. You cannot see their mouth, their expressions, or their body language. You only have their voice, and sometimes they speak quickly. Maybe you answer the phone and suddenly forget every English word you know. If this happens to you, do not worry. Speaking on the phone is a skill, and you can improve it with practice. You do not need advanced English or long sentences. You need a few useful phrases that you can use again and again. Today, we will practice answering the phone, introducing yourself, asking for someone, taking messages, asking people to repeat themselves, and ending calls naturally. We will also look at casual calls and more professional phone conversations. By the end, you will have simple phrases that can make your next English phone call much easier. Let's begin with answering the phone. In an informal situation, the easiest word is simply hello. Imagine your friend calls you. You answer, hello? Your friend says, "Hi, Emma, it's Jack." You can respond, "Oh, hi, Jack. How are you?" This is simple and completely natural. You do not need a special greeting when you know the person calling you. But sometimes you do not recognize the number. You answer, "Hello?" and the person says, "Hi, is this Emma?" You can say, "Yes, speaking." The word speaking means, "Yes, this is Emma." You could also say, "Yes, this is Emma." Both answers are natural. If someone asks, "May I speak to Emma, please?" and you are Emma, you can answer, "Speaking." This is a very useful phone expression to remember. Now imagine you are the person making the call. You want to speak to someone named Daniel. You can say, "Hello, may I speak to Daniel, please?" This sounds polite and works well in professional situations. In a more casual situation, you can say, "Hi, is Daniel there?" If Daniel answers the phone himself, he might say, "This is Daniel." Then you can introduce yourself. "Hi, Daniel. This is Emma from Green Street School." Notice that on the phone we often say, "This is Emma," rather than "I am Emma." For example, "Hi, this is Emma from Bright Star Hotel." Or, "Hello, this is Emma. I'm calling about my appointment." The phrase "I'm calling about" is extremely useful because it quickly explains why you are calling. You can say, "I'm calling about my order," "I'm calling about tomorrow's meeting," or "I'm calling about a job interview." Let's practice a simple professional call. The receptionist says, "Good morning, City Hotel. How can I help you?" Emma says, "Good morning. This is Emma Taylor. I'm calling about my reservation for Friday." The receptionist says, "Of course. Could I have your booking number, please?" Emma answers, "Yes, it's 4582. This conversation is polite, clear, and easy to understand. Professional English does not need to be complicated. Now let's talk about one of the biggest problems on phone calls: not understanding the other person. Maybe the connection is bad. Maybe they speak too quickly. Maybe you hear a word you do not know. Do not simply say yes when you do not understand. You can politely ask the person to repeat themselves. Say, "Sorry, could you repeat that, please?" This sentence is useful in almost every phone conversation. You can also say, "Sorry, I didn't catch that." This means you did not hear or understand what the person said. For example, the person says their name very quickly. You can say, "Sorry, I didn't catch your name. Could you say it again, please?" If they are speaking too fast, say, "Could you speak a little more slowly, please?" These sentences do not make your English sound weak. They make your communication clearer. Sometimes the problem is the phone connection. The other person's voice disappears for a moment. You can say, "Sorry, you're breaking up." This means the sound is stopping and starting because the connection is poor. You might also say, "The connection isn't very good." If you cannot hear anything, say, "Sorry, I can't hear you very well. The other person may move somewhere quieter or call you again. Now imagine this conversation. Jack says, "Hi, Emma. I'm calling about the meeting on Thursday. We've moved it to 3:30. Emma does not hear the time clearly. Instead of guessing, she says, "Sorry, did you say 3:30? Jack says, "Yes, 3:30. Emma responds, "Great, thank you." Repeating important information is a smart habit, especially with times, dates, addresses, names, and phone numbers. You can also confirm information by saying, "Let me make sure I have that right." For example, "Let me make sure I have that right. The appointment is Tuesday at 10, correct?" This sounds professional and helps prevent mistakes. On the phone, clear communication is more important than pretending you understood everything the first time. Another useful skill is spelling names. If someone does not understand your name, they may ask, "Could you spell that, please?" You can answer slowly, one letter at a time. You can also ask the same question when you hear an unfamiliar name. "Sorry, could you spell your last name for me?" This is completely normal in professional phone calls. The most important thing is to stay calm. You are allowed to ask someone to repeat information. You are allowed to speak slowly. You are allowed to take a second before answering. Speaking English on the phone like a pro does not mean speaking very fast or using difficult vocabulary. It means communicating clearly, politely, and confidently, even when you need someone to say something again. Now let's talk about what happens when the person you want to speak to is not available. Imagine you call an office and say, "Hello, may I speak to Mr. Brown, please?" The receptionist says, "I'm sorry, he's not available at the moment." You can respond, "Okay, could I leave a message, please?" This is a very useful phrase for professional calls. The receptionist may say, "Of course. What would you like me to tell him?" You can then give a short and clear message. For example, you could say, "Please tell him Emma called about tomorrow's meeting." You can also say, "Could you ask him to call me back, please?" To call someone back means to return their phone call. The receptionist might ask, "Can I have your phone number?" You can give your number slowly and clearly. If the number is important, ask the person to repeat it. "Could you read that back to me, please?" This helps you make sure there are no mistakes. Now imagine that you answer the phone and someone asks for your coworker. The caller says, "Hi, could I speak to Sarah, please?" You know Sarah is busy, so you say, "I'm sorry, Sarah is in a meeting right now. Can I take a message?" The caller says, "Yes, please. Could you ask her to call David?" You can respond, "Of course. Does she have your number?" This is a simple and professional conversation that happens every day in offices and businesses. Another useful phrase is, "Would you like to leave a message?" You can use this when the person someone wants is unavailable. For example, "I'm afraid Jack is away from his desk at the moment. Would you like to leave a message?" The phrase "I'm afraid" does not mean you are scared here. It is simply a polite way to introduce information that may disappoint the caller. You might say, "I'm afraid she's not available today," or "I'm afraid he has already left the office." Now let's practice putting someone on hold. If you need a moment to find information, you can say, "Could you hold for a moment, please?" You can also say, "Would you mind holding for a moment?" In a business, you may hear, "Please hold while I check that for you." When you return, say, "Thank you for holding." These small phrases make a phone conversation sound polite and professional. Imagine Emma calls a doctor's office. The receptionist says, "Good afternoon, Green Medical Center. How can I help you?" Emma says, "Hi, I'm calling to check the time of my appointment tomorrow." The receptionist answers, "Certainly. Could you hold for a moment while I check?" Emma says, "Of course." A few seconds later, the receptionist returns and says, "Thank you for holding. Your appointment is at 11:15. Emma replies, "Great, thank you very much." Now let's look at making appointments by phone. You might say, "Hi, I'd like to make an appointment, please." The person may ask, "What day works best for you?" You can answer, "Do you have anything available on Wednesday?" If they say, We have an opening at 2 o'clock. You can respond, 2 o'clock works for me. The word opening means an available time. You may also hear, we have availability at 2. What if the suggested time does not work for you? You can politely say, I'm sorry, I can't make it at 2. Do you have anything later? Or, would 4 o'clock be possible? You do not need to give a long explanation. Keep your answer simple. Once you choose a time, confirm it before ending the call. So that's Wednesday at 4 o'clock, right? The other person can then confirm the details. Phone calls are also common when ordering something or asking for information. Imagine you call a restaurant. You could say, Hi, I'd like to make a reservation for 2 people, please. The employee asks, What time would you like? You say, Do you have a table available at 7? They say, Yes, we do. Then they may ask, Can I have your name, please? You answer, Yes, it's Emma Taylor. Sometimes you need to change or cancel something. You can say, I'm calling to change my appointment, or I'd like to cancel my reservation, please. If you need a different date, say, Could I move it to Friday? If you need a different time, ask, Is there anything available in the afternoon? These phrases are useful for hotels, restaurants, doctors, dentists, meetings, and many other situations. Now let's talk about unexpected calls. Maybe someone calls while you are busy. You do not have to continue the conversation immediately. You can say, Sorry, I can't talk right now. Can I call you back? In a casual conversation, you might say, I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you later? If you want to suggest a time, say, Can I call you back in about an hour? This is polite and gives the other person clear information. And what if you call someone at a bad time? After introducing yourself, you can ask, Is this a good time to talk? This is especially useful for work calls. The person may say, Yes, I have a few minutes, or Actually, I'm about to go into a meeting. You can then say, No problem. When would be a better time? Asking this simple question shows respect for the other person's time. The key is to learn small groups of phrases for common situations. You do not need to memorize a long phone script. Practice phrases like, I'm calling about. Could you repeat that, please? Can I take a message? Could you hold for a moment? And, can I call you back? When these expressions become familiar, you will spend less time translating in your head and more time focusing on the conversation itself. Now let's practice how to end a phone call naturally. Sometimes English learners know how to start a call, but they are not sure how to finish it. You do not need to suddenly say, bye, and hang up. First, you can show that the conversation is complete. You might say, okay, I think that's everything. In a professional call, you can say, thank you for your help. Then you can finish with, have a great day, or thanks again, goodbye. For example, Emma calls a hotel to change her reservation. After everything is confirmed, she says, great, thank you for your help. So my reservation is now for Saturday night, correct? The employee says, that's correct. Emma answers, perfect. Thanks again. Have a nice day. The employee says, you too. Goodbye. This ending sounds polite, clear, and professional. With friends, the ending can be more relaxed. You might say, okay, I'll talk to you later, or it was nice talking to you. You can also say, I have to go now, but I'll call you later. If you are making plans, confirm them before you finish. For example, okay, so I'll see you at 6 outside the restaurant. Your friend says, sounds good. Then you can say, great. See you then. Bye. Now let's put everything together in a complete professional phone call. The receptionist says, good morning, Westside Dental Clinic. How can I help you? Emma says, good morning. This is Emma Taylor. I'm calling about my appointment on Thursday. The receptionist asks, how can I help? Emma says, I'm afraid I can't make it on Thursday. I'd like to move the appointment to another day. The receptionist says, of course. Would Friday morning work for you? Emma says, Friday could work. What times do you have available? The receptionist answers, "We have 9:30 or 11:15. Emma says, "Sorry, did you say 9:30 or 11:15? The receptionist repeats the times. Emma says 11:15 would be perfect. The receptionist confirms, "Okay, I've moved your appointment to Friday at 11:15. Emma replies, "Great. Thank you very much for your help." Notice how Emma handled the call. She introduced herself, explained why she was calling, asked for clarification when necessary, chose a new time, and confirmed the information. She did not use difficult vocabulary. She simply used clear sentences at the right moments. That is what good phone English sounds like. Clear communication is more important than complicated English. Now imagine a different situation. Your phone rings and you answer, "Hello?" The caller says, "Hello, may I speak to Emma?" You answer, "Speaking." The caller says, "Hi, Emma. This is Daniel from City Language School. I'm calling about your English class tomorrow." You say, "Sure. Is everything okay?" Daniel explains that the class will begin 1 hour later than usual. You do not hear the new time clearly, so you say, "Sorry, I didn't catch that. What time does the class start?" Daniel says, "It starts at 10:30. You respond, 10:30, right? Daniel says, "Yes, that's correct." You answer, "Perfect. Thank you for letting me know." Daniel says, "You're welcome. Have a good day." You finish with, "You too, goodbye." There is one more useful skill, leaving a voicemail. If someone does not answer, you may hear a message asking you to leave your name and number. Keep your message short. You can say, "Hi Jack, this is Emma. I'm calling about our meeting tomorrow. Please call me back when you have a chance. My number is 555-0182. Thanks. Bye." Speak slowly when giving your phone number, especially if the person needs to write it down. Before an important call, it can help to prepare a few notes. Write down the person's name, the reason for your call, important dates or numbers, and 2 or 3 questions you need to ask. You do not need to write every sentence. A few keywords can help you stay calm and remember what you need. If you become nervous, slow down and look at your notes. There is no prize for finishing the call quickly. You can also practice phone English without making a real call. Imagine a situation and speak both parts aloud. Practice calling a hotel, making an appointment, asking for a coworker, or leaving a message. Record your voice and listen again. Pay attention to whether your words are clear and whether you are speaking too quickly. Practicing the same phrases several times will make them easier to remember when you need them. Let's review the most useful expressions from today. This is Emma. I'm calling about. May I speak to Jack, please? Sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't catch that. Could you speak a little more slowly? Can I leave a message? Could you hold for a moment? Can I call you back? And let me make sure I have that right. If you can use these phrases confidently, you can handle many everyday phone calls in English. Thank you for listening to Speak English for Beginners. I am Emma, and I am very happy you practiced English with me today. Remember, speaking English on the phone becomes easier every time you practice. Speak slowly, listen carefully, confirm important information, and never be afraid to ask someone to repeat something. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep improving step by step. See you in the next podcast.